In this video we're going to take a look at the lineup of Nokia's Lumia Windows Phone 8 devices, the 920 at the high end, 520 at the low end. Now the obvious question is, which device do I buy? Why have Nokia created 5 devices? I mean, they say this is kind of their complete lineup of devices. In terms of global market terms, there are some variants for the 820 and some of the other devices as well. Well, the answer to that is Nokia wants to create a device that's suitable for everybody. So low end, high end. Prices, well, let's have a quick look at those. These prices are all in euros. They represent the price before taxes and subsidies. So on the high street, depending on which market you are, they're going to vary in price, and also whether you buy them on a contract. Thinking about the UK in terms of pay-as-you-go and SIM-free prices, £100 pay-as-you-go on O2 at the moment, £150 SIM-free. You add about £50, you get to the next device. So the 620 here, about £150 and £200 respectively. Here you're getting about 250, 300. The 720 is a bit of a jump from the 720, partly because it's just been introduced. Get a slightly bigger jump up to the 820 and the 920 here. That's because they're higher end devices, I guess. But again, you're looking at a price of about 375, 450 pounds. Now that will vary because you can get some pretty good deals at the moment, but you can see there's clearly a price progression here, and especially in the pay-as-you-go market, £50 can make a big difference, and so there are some significant pricing difference between here. At the top end, I'm not sure the pricing matters quite so much, and might explain why the 820 hasn't been as popular as the 920. Now, while we've got all the devices lined up here, I do want to have a look at the same photo on the screen as of all of these devices, and the reason for doing that, you can see the difference in the screens. Now, immediately these two will probably stand out. That's because they're AMOLED displays, red, green, blue stripe in both cases. That means they're just a little bit more vibrancy, a bit more colour bounce coming out. It's particularly noticeable when you're doing a video like this. In person you will also see it if you're side by side, but just pick out the 720 here. There's actually not all that much difference here. It is an LCD display, but the 720 is particularly good. It's also got a great viewing angle. The worst device in terms of screen, the 520, not really surprising. Also seeing it on an angle here. If I bring it into the middle, you see it does look a little bit better. But the best screen, well, that's the 920, no real surprise there. It's got pure motion, which means it doesn't blur so much, and also it's the high resolution display. It's running at 768 x 1280 as opposed to all of these, which are 480 by 800. The other big divide between these devices is here we've got the low spec, and here we have the high spec devices. What does that mean? Well, processors. These are both running dual-core 1.5 GHz with a gigabyte of RAM. These are all running dual-core 1 GHz and just 512 megabytes of RAM. Does it make a difference to performance? Yes, if you run these side by side. These ones will open applications slightly more slowly. Graphically intensively, apps it's more noticeable, so maybe games or something like Microsoft's Photosynth Panorama application. Actually though, in day-to-day, what surprises me most is you don't see a really big difference. They all actually feel roughly the same, and I think that's a real achievement for Windows Phone 8. They've also got pretty much identical software, certainly in terms of everything that it ships with, all the standard stuff, and that operates across the board the same. There are some differences because there are some hardware omissions which we'll talk about in a minute. There are a handful of apps, about 5 or 10 to my knowledge, mostly games that won't run on these devices and will run on these, but it's not a big factor like it was last time round for Windows Phone 7.5. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these devices. We've said that the power, the performance and the kind of what they can do is very similar. So actually the specs become really important. If it's not about the specs, it's then maybe about the pricing. But we'll go through each of these devices, talk about some of the design, the highlights, why you might buy these devices. Now the 520, we've already said it's the cheapest. Just looking at the shape here, it's great in the hand. It's got a kind of cup shape, so it fits very comfortably in the hand. You can see there's a curved back here. It's got a removable back cover. You can just pop that off. You can see inside you've got the micro SIM and the micro SD card slot. Put that back on again. You can see here we've got a 5 megapixel camera on the back. There's no accompanying LED flash, and so this is definitely the poorest camera of these 5 devices, nor is there a front facing camera, so no video calls. There's also no NFC. Not a big deal really at the moment. In some ways it's not that widely used, but becoming more important. More interestingly, there's no compass inside, so that does have an implication for some navigation and for some augmented reality usage. But given how cheap this device is, you can buy 4 of these for one of those. I actually think the hardware cuts are pretty reasonable. I might have liked a slightly better quality screen, but that's being very picky. And it's really, Nokia has very good screens on all of its devices, and this is kind of more like a standard screen, if you like. the sunlight readability enhancements, you get them on all devices, but it does feel a bit missing on the 520. It does have the super sensitive touch though, so you can use it with gloves or the back of your fingernail, so that's a nice extra in what's a pretty cheap device. The one other hardware omission you might talk about is high quality microphones. It's in all of these, but not in the 520. So if you're doing video recording, the audio isn't great. Actually, the video recording is one element where those specifications I was talking about earlier play in. These can all record 720p video, these can record 1080p video. That's just the extra oomph of the processor and the RAM. Now let's talk about the next device up, the 620. Now this is, as I said, about £50 more expensive in the UK, but it does have a front-facing camera. There's an LED flash on the back. The actual camera module is very similar to the 520, but it will produce better results in low light conditions thanks to that flash. There's also a compass inside. But what I really like about the 620 is it gives you an option for a smaller screen, 3.8 inches versus 4 inches, 4.3 inches and 4.5 inches, so very usable as a one-handed device. You can see I can easily reach into that top corner. I also really like this dual shot on the case. It's a removable case. You can see here it's yellow and what's apparently green, it's actually blue overlaid on yellow, so you get this really nice green effect. So I think this is a very fashionable, friendly phone, and for me it's worth paying the extra £50. But as I said, in the pay-as-you-go market, £50 can make a big difference. So 620, a very nice device. Now let's move up to the 720 here. This is the recently released mid-tier device. In many ways it is the middle of the road device, but it has this really nice monobody design. The polycarbonate is the same really as that's used in these two other devices here. It's actually slightly thinner, so this device is quite considerably lighter than the others. Thinking about weight is actually an important one. These two devices, the 920, 820, known for being heavy, 185 grams, 160 grams here, but these are all about the same, 124 grams, 127 grams and 128 grams, so quite a bit lighter. So I think this is a more accessible device in that sense, or more approachable for most people. The weight doesn't become an issue at that size. Also in terms of volume, cubic centimeters, 75, 76 and 78 centimeters, 83 and 99. So these are both definitely bigger devices, and so 720 really nice in that respect. It does have the micro SD card slot on the side, but the real star of the show in terms of hardware differences I think is this camera. You can see the Carl Zeiss branding there, LED flash, but it's this camera module here. 6.7 megapixels doesn't sound like as much as some of these like 8 and 8.7 here, but it's very high quality. It's got an aperture of 1.9, which means it takes great low light shots. Maybe not quite as good as the 920 here with its OIS camera, but I was really impressed by it, and the performance is certainly better than the 820. Also a very good front-facing camera, HD resolution, good for video conferencing. It's got some extra elements. It's actually 4 elements in the lens here. It's also a BSI sensor, and so the 720 in terms of camera performance really is very good indeed, and quite a bit ahead of its competitors on other platforms at this price point. So I think that sort of concludes the 720, but when we put these devices back down, we will just talk a little bit about battery life, because the 720 is again a bit of the star of the show. 2000 milliamp hour battery here, same as on the 920. For the rest of the devices, you've got 1650 here, 1300 and 1430. This is the smallest battery capacity, but it's got a smaller screen, AMOLED, so it's not that big a deal. These will all be about the same, but these two will definitely be ahead, and that's certainly borne out by my own experience. Now let's talk about the 820. Now why would you buy the 820 over the 720? Because I've already said that the camera is better on the 720. Well, this is a very solid device. It feels great, the build quality is good, but really it's going to be about the connectivity. This supports LTE, the 720 does not. All of these three devices, HSDPA Cat14, that's 24 megabits per second down, and HSuper Cat6, that's 5.7 megabits per second down. These are the same, but they also have LTE connectivity, and so this is kind of the top of the range device without paying the extra to get the 920. I do like the removable covers on this. People will like the fact that you can take the back cover off this 820, or you can if you get your fingernails in the right place. Just have to take my word for it. There we go, as it comes off. That actually speaks towards the solidity of the device. There is a micro SD card slot hidden under the battery here, as well as the usual micro SIM slot. And you can feel as that clicks back together. That's, the build quality on the 820 is really good. And so if you like that, if you like a solid, chunky feeling device, you'll really like the 820. Now let's go up to the big daddy, the 920. It is a heavier device, but it's also got some of the really nice design here with the curved glass. But really it's about the camera on the back here. It's optical image stabilization. That means great low light shots. But actually more than that, it means a much more forgiving camera in all conditions. So if you're waving the camera about when you take a picture, it will still get a great picture. When some of these devices, that may not be true. The other thing about the 920 is it kind of has the extra specs in other areas. So for example, this has got 32 gigabytes of internal memory. These are all 8 gigabytes, and so you won't need to buy a micro SD card. Well, in fact, you shouldn't, because there is no micro SD card slot in this 920. It's got all the extra sensors, and it's a top of the range device, and so people like having that device. I would say in terms of value for money, the 620 and the 720 are pretty evenly matched. If I was recommending a device and could just choose one, it would probably be the 720. If people want the best camera, go for the 920. If they want the best value, go for the 620. But it really is going to be a personal decision. Each of these devices has something to recommend them. For me, on the 520, it's about the price. On the 620, it's kind of about the design, but also the overall value for money. You get pretty much all the hardware features of these higher end devices, but in a lower cost device. The 720, elegant, stylish, good battery life, great camera. 820, best possible connectivity, all the main hardware features without having to pay the full whack for the 920. But the 920, of course, top of the end device. You get things like the best camera. You also get G wireless charging built in. You can get it for both of these, but in this case it needs an extra back cover. In this case it needs a specialized case, and so I don't qualify it as quite the same as the 920 here. So there we go. There's a quick run through the Lumia lineup. Hopefully you'll be able to choose a device that you like. I think it's great having the choice here. It's easy to say there should just be a couple of devices, but each of these, as I say, represents a market segment. There we go. A quick run through all of Nokia's Lumia devices. Lumia 520, 620, 720, 820 and 920.